Are you one of those people who, when you're looking at a candidate for president of the United States, or really any candidate, you're looking for someone who you think should be, well, in the case of president, the pastor of the United States versus just the president of the United States? I have some friends, and they tell me they were Mike Huckabee supporters through a couple of different election cycles, and they tell me that this is truly important to them. But I think to most Americans, it's not. And it's probably a good thing for Donald Trump, who yesterday was appearing on ABC's This Week when he was asked by one of the reporters on that program how his Easter Sunday was going.
Holiday, what does Easter mean to you? What's the Trump family Easter tradition?
Well, it really means something very special. I'm going to church in an hour from now, and it's going to be it's a beautiful church. I'm in Florida. And it's just a very special time for me, and it really represents family and get-together and something, if you're a Christian, it's just a very important day.
And something. I'm not sure what it is, but it represents something. This is the same candidate who said that when he goes to church, he takes the little cracker. He's a Presbyterian. Presbyterian USA. Now, way back in about 1983 or 84, when I was a college student and I had a roommate, he dragged me to a Presbyterian church, Presbyterian USA, and this is in a college town, so it was well attended because it was a liberal denomination and you had a lot of liberals. This was before college professors mainly became atheists. Some of them still, had some attachment to Christian faith, albeit, as I say, a liberal denomination. And I can remember they served communion, which he told me they do only once a month. This was my college roommate, only once a month. But it wasn't a cracker. It was just it was like someone had gone down and bought a loaf of Wonder Bread and then chopped it up into tiny pieces. Because in most of these churches, it's a symbolic offering. Unlike, for instance, in my case, where we believe it is literally the body of Christ. But Trump has said some of these things in the past, and it raises a few eyebrows, and then I'll get up the next morning and I'll look at some of the comments that come in from people, Eric Erickson and the like, of course. Eric, being holier than thou, always takes on Donald Trump and says he's not right for office because apparently he's not a really devout fundamentalist Christian. And yet I think for most Americans it doesn't matter. They're not looking for a preacher or a priest in office. They're looking for someone who just simply is not politically correct. And when he comes across something in his way that he doesn't like, he's going to haul out the baseball bat and wham! And I think that there's an Australian politician writing today, and I happen to see he's the head of the Labour Party in Australia, which likely means he's about, I don't know, as far left as a Bernie Sanders would be in this country. And the fellow is writing, I found the link at Real Clear Politics this morning. He said, there's no secret to Donald Trump's success. And he said, I predicted it months ago. And he said, the reason that pundits in America don't get it right is because they don't realize most Americans are not really conservatives. Most Americans, the reason they like Rush Limbaugh and conservative talk radio is for one reason and one reason only. Limbaugh hammers the political class. He'll even hammer Republicans. Sean Hannity will do the same. You understand? So people, they enjoy seeing the powerful afflicted. It's got less to do, according to what this writer says, with their political philosophy on these programs. There may be some truth to that. He also says Donald Trump, despite all the criticism that he doesn't know anything about foreign affairs, is what you call a political realist, along the lines of Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger. So he doesn't come to this and say, all right, I have a rigid view of what we should do in all of these situations, but right now, ISIS is a pest, so we'll take on ISIS. And this writer's belief is that's what's resonating with the American people. And he said it's just, he also pointed out, we keep hearing, well, Muslims won't vote for Donald Trump because Donald Trump says that we should ban Muslims from entering the country, or at least have a more stringent policy when it comes to vetting who these people are. Well, turns out this Australian politician went through all of the minutiae so far of the caucuses as well as the primaries and discovered that a lot of American Muslims who were Democrats decided to register as Republicans, and they've been voting for Donald Trump. Figure that one out. Well, if you're a wealthy doctor and you're a Muslim, you don't necessarily like your co-religionists going around the world blowing up people either. You don't want them coming here and blowing up your patients and your neighbors. and the people you golf with. You don't want anything to do with any of that. And so they're backing Donald Trump. Who would have thunk it? Meanwhile, Trump is telling ABC's This Week that he believes Ted Cruz is definitely behind the attacks on Trump's current and third wife.
That super PAC is very friendly to Ted Cruz. He knew all about it 100%. So he started it. I didn't start it. There's no way in a million years that super PAC did that without his absolute knowledge.
Okay, I got a few thoughts on this, and I'm going to make the Trumpistas very angry this morning. But if you check out our Facebook page and you also read our website where there's something called Colley's Commentary, I made a few points about all of this yesterday. Number one, Ted Cruz is not stupid. I mean, he managed to get a couple of good, solid degrees, including a law degree, and he's argued before the Supreme Court and won a case there, a big case. So he's not stupid. It is illegal for candidates to cross-table with these political action committees that may support them. And, in fact, if Ted Cruz were to do that, it would definitely be the end of his campaign. So let's get that out of the way that Cruz is coordinating with this political action committee. I know from a political standpoint, Trump can say that, and a lot of people say, dang straight. But no, Ted Cruz isn't doing that because he knows what it would mean for him. It could be a very, very, very serious charge. Number two, the Political Action Committee is not supporting Ted Cruz that released the photographs of Trump's wife. We'll get to the photographs in just a moment. It's an anti-Trump PAC, not necessarily a pro-Ted Cruz PAC. The photographs that were released, and they were apparently sent to various voters in the caucus in Utah a couple of weeks ago, are already in the public domain. The current Mrs. Trump used to be a model, and she used to take her clothes off and have her picture taken. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, women who took their clothes off for money had a certain reputation in the community. Now, in this day and age, when everything goes and we don't really have what you'd call a traditional morality in place, that doesn't necessarily bother a lot of people. Mrs. Trump also married a man who is not only older than she is, he's not only old enough to be her father, but then some atop that. I mean, he's practically 40, almost 40 years older than she is. So I'll tell you a little thought piece here I've got going on and where I'm taking this. I'm going to be 54 shortly. If tomorrow I went out and I married a wealthy 85-year-old widow and consummated the marriage and started living with her, you would probably think that me, being the younger man, much younger man in this situation, was simply doing this because I hoped to inherit a great amount of wealth, and that I was willing to grit my teeth and do a lot of things in order to inherit that great amount of wealth, and that I could live in the lap of luxury, travel anywhere I wanted, wear any clothes I want, drink the finest champagne. Well, isn't that what the third Mrs. Trump is doing? At least that's the perception. If that's the perception of me, if I were to marry an 85-year-old wealthy widow, then why wouldn't that be the perception of Mrs. Trump? So it does raise the question, is she a harlot? Then we get a story last week that, well, I'll tell you right now, people say, well, mainstream media has not covered this, so they're covering for Ted Cruz. The National Enquirer put up 5 photographs of women, although they pixelated the faces, and said these 5 women have been having affairs with Ted Cruz, who's a so-called Christian, and apparently, according to the National Enquirer, is really just a hypocrite. First, the fellow who runs the National Enquirer, the publisher, I kid you not, his last name is Pecker. That's true. I'm not making this up. I'm not trying to say anything that titillates anyone out there this morning. I'm just telling you that's what the guy's name is. He happens to be one of Donald Trump's best friends. The 5 pixelated photographs that are shown in that story in the National Enquirer, somebody managed to kind of descramble one of them and discovered it's Trump's top spokeswoman, who then vehemently denied that she was having any sort of affair with Ted Cruz and in fact said he's not my kind of guy. Which leads us, being the National Enquirer, to wonder, who are the other 4 pictures? Well, a couple of them, I'm told, are aliens from Area 51 that get trotted out for a periodic story in National Enquirer, and the other couple are Sasquatches. Well, it's the National Enquirer. I mean, they just grabbed the first 5 photographs from the pile and they threw them up there and said, Ted Cruz has been having an affair with all of these women, or affairs, excuse me, plural. But Drudge, which has been nothing but a Trump campaign appendage throughout the last several months, Drudge hasn't touched this story. Isn't that funny? That if Drudge could discredit Ted Cruz to benefit Donald Trump, Drudge would then do it. But Drudge hasn't touched the story. All right. The New York Times, the Bible of American liberalism, hasn't touched the story. The Washington Post, sometimes known as Pravda on the Potomac, hasn't touched the story. And maybe you're sitting out there as a Trumpista saying, well, that's because they liked Ted Cruz better than they like Donald Trump. Excuse me. Pravda on the Potomac and the Bible of American liberalism are not taking an opportunity to attack Ted Cruz. Three things here. Number one, he's a Christian. That's a bad word in the New York Times office and at the Washington Post. Ted Cruz, number two, is a conservative. There's 2 strikes against him among liberal media. And now, number 3, he's from Texas. That's 3 strikes against Ted Cruz. So, in the media universe, 1, 2, 3, that's a perfect strikeout to take on Ted Cruz. And yet the liberal media hasn't done it. Even though they would salivate to be able to say Ted Cruz is a hypocrite, so they can try and portray all Christian conservatives that way and all Texans that way. But they haven't found any evidence. Drudge hasn't found any evidence. So here's Trump saying a super PAC is coordinating with Ted Cruz on this, but in fact, it can't. And then Trump's best friend publishes this story in the rag called the National Enquirer. And then Trump claims I've got nothing to do with that. And yet legitimate media, which would love to take down Ted Cruz, isn't touching the story with a 10-foot pole. At this stage of the game, and I have been saying all along, anybody but Clinton, ABC. And I of course, started out in the camp of Rand Paul. Rand Paul was not too terribly exciting and faded. Then I moved over to Bobby Jindal. Bobby Jindal, again, not too terribly exciting. And voters want excitement, don't they? They want to be entertained. So despite the fact that these were brilliant men, we couldn't have them. And then I thought, well, I don't have many choices left here. Rick Perry was out. I'll get on board with Ted Cruz. But if it comes right down to it, and if it's Hillary versus Donald Trump, I'll go with Trump. Or if it's Sanders versus Donald Trump, I'll go with Trump. However, after the last several days, Donald Trump has proved that he has nothing but what they used to call a scalawag. And frankly, at this point, if someone hauled off and smacked him in the teeth, they should shove their fist far enough down his throat where he would have to ask you to scratch his piles. And it's unfortunate that nothing like that has happened, because at the moment, someone needs to take Donald Trump out behind the woodshed. Bill Colley with you. You're listening to Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Short break, but if you've got thoughts on this topic, 736-0300. Be patient. We'll get to some telephone calls. I wanted to point out, too, as well, that some of the major networks, the alphabet networks, are starting to cover this story, but they're saying, well, it's both candidates are just completely out of control. You know, you should, as a good American, therefore, take the instruction from those of us at ABC, NBC, and CBS, and you should be voting for the candidate of our choice, and that would be Hillary or Bernie, or perhaps the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden. But you should never vote for one of those terrible, terrible, awful Republicans, because they would bring an end to the war against ISIS, and we can't have that, and they would stop all of the illegal immigration, and we can't have that, and they're not very nice people. But again, this is all on Donald Trump's hands. And to sit there and try to say, well, it's both of these candidates are just being bad, bad, bad. No, that's not the case. 924, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program at 736-0300. If you're having trouble listening to our program, have I got a remedy for you? Dr. Christine Pickup is a doctor of audiology based in Rupert. She's at the medical building, and that is at 1218 9th Street, unit number 2. It's called Mount Harrison Audiology. You can find her online at mountharrisonaudiology.com or give her office a call for a screening, 312-0957. Did you know that the health of the inner ear is affected by your cardiovascular and kidney health? The inner ear is very sensitive to changes in your blood supply. If you've had recent heart problems or kidney problems, you should have your hearing checked right away. One of Trump's people was on CNN yesterday. She not only is she working as a Trumpista now, she used to work for Al Gore. Yeah, enough said. Anyway, we've got a caller with us, 7360300, and you can be on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're on the air.
Morning, Bill. I was going to call in Friday, but Friday you weren't there. So, this whole thing with Donald Trump is just amazing. What got me, and I try to understand what Donald Trump supporters see, and I understand that they like the fact that he's just going to punch somebody in the nose, but he reacts so fast without figuring out what's going on. Do you really want him behind a chair with the armament that he has for somebody that reacts so fast under temperament that they could create a problem instead of fix one?
I don't think Donald Trump would go off kilter and, suddenly start launching nuclear missiles. I don't believe that. On the other hand, and sometimes there is a need to have someone tell the bad guys off and not be politically correct. But yes, there are times when he also should sit back and check his tongue.
And not only his tongue, is the facts. I mean, look at this whole thing. So a super PAC said something. So instead of attacking the super PAC, he attacks a wife because his wife was attacked. He attacked Ted Cruz for speaking the truth and called him a liar. Everybody believed it. You point out something that Ted Cruz has actually said about Donald Trump that can't be proven, and I'll back down. But the problem is no matter what happens to Donald Trump just goes off on a tip. And that might scare some people, but sometimes that can be bad.
But as I said, too, what Trump doesn't seem to understand is that in traditional America, there was a time when his wife's actions would have been viewed as whoredom. And now I'm not accusing her of that, but I'm telling you right now, she married a man, 38 years older than she was. He's extremely wealthy. She's taken off her clothes for the cameras before. There are just a number of things here that when I was a kid growing up in my neighborhood and the things that my parents believed in, this was not a woman that they would have wanted me to associate with, nor anyone else associate with.
Well, that's understandable, and she is a beautiful woman, and he has admitted that. He has also admitted that he probably won't be married to her for a long time, which tells you his moral standing.
Right.
As soon as he finds somebody more beautiful or more risque, he'll change.
Gee, if he didn't marry them in the first place, though, and he just had affairs, shack-ups, he wouldn't have to give them big chunks of his wealth.
Right. Well, she also signed a prenup, But, he can spend money on all kinds of stuff. But it's all proven stuff. But yet, when somebody brings it up, they're a liar, or 1 minute they're his friend, and the next minute they're his mortal enemy. The guy cannot stick on a train track going one direction long enough to follow him. He's just all over the place, and that bothers me. It bothers me to no end. And my own dad is a Donald Trump supporter, and we got in such a big fight over it. It wasn't even funny. But it's you get in that mode, and you're so mad that you want somebody to do this. But I've never made a good decision being mad in my life. I've always made a bad decision, and that's just not good.
And I think it's like road rage. I thank you very much for the telephone call. I had a couple of those instances in the last several weeks, and I'll tell you what, it takes a lot to grit your teeth and not, shake your fist out the windshield. But you're probably better off because 5 minutes after it's over, you're not going to remember it. 9:30, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. More of your calls on the way. We've got a short break. It's 34. Yeah, this is a topic that's not going to go away anytime soon, but it should. I was thinking about some of the Trumpistas and what they believe. And the other day, I was looking at some comments on Facebook, and one of these ardent Trump supporters said that Mrs. Cruz wasn't actually a woman, and that you could tell by her chin, by Heidi Cruz's chin, you could tell that she had been a man at one time and must have had a sex change operation. Which then, of course, raises the question, well, where did the little kids come from? And I guess the argument would then be, well, they must have adopted. Well, how come this hasn't been reported in media? Well, media doesn't like Donald Trump, so they're taking Ted Cruz's side, don't you understand? The conspiracy theories that these Trumpistas, that they actually come up with so that they can continue to support their candidate no matter what. Let me put it this way. A lot of people support Donald Trump, and they're good people, and they're supporting Trump because they're fed up with what's going on in this country. I understand that. And I'll tell you what, there are some things that he says, I say, you're darn right. I'm glad you're giving it to him. But I got to tell you something. There are people also who are unbalanced. I'll put it this way. If you're a Trump supporter, you're not necessarily unbalanced. But if you're unbalanced, you're likely a Trump supporter. Can we put it that way? 9:35, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. If you'd like to reach our program today, telephone number is 736-0300, 736-0300. The fact of the matter is, if you're bat crap crazy, you're supporting Donald Trump. That's not to say that everyone supporting Trump has lost their minds. But for the people who've lost their minds, the Trump campaign seems to be a good stop for them. I've got this from Don Lemon, I almost confused him with Chet Lemon. That's from the baseball world. Don Lemon is an anchor at CNN, and he's talking to a Trump supporter on air who used to be an Al Gore, what you'd call acolyte, and an Al Gore assistant. And she's now working for Donald Trump because he treated her well on The Apprentice. Good for him. But Lemon cut her off during the course of conversation on CNN, on the Clinton News Network.
This Twitter war between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz this week was it's over the top, really. What's your opinion of the retweet of the Heidi Cruz and Melania Trump pictures?
Well, I don't think we should start there. We should start with the fact that a super PAC that supports
No.
Cruz
I want to
started
know.
to attack
I want to know
Donald
what your
Trump's
opinion
wife.
is. I'm not going to let you do
And
that.
Don, let me just say, I'm going to answer that.
Omarosa, stop.
I'm going to answer that because let me tell you, if you
Omarosa,
attack his
stop.
wife,
Omarosa.
he's going to
Okay,
come
let's
back
stop.
for you.
Everybody, cut the mic. Everybody.
This is what they're
We're
doing.
not doing that. I want everyone on this panel to answer the question.
See, now she just figured she's going to just keep repeating that talking point that the Super PAC backs Ted Cruz. It does not. Again, it's an anti-Trump PAC. It's not a Ted Cruz PAC. Political Action Committee, shortened to PAC. That's the abbreviation. But she was going to go on TV and try to perpetuate that. Again, the old, was it Goebbels, worked as the propaganda minister for the Nazis, said if you tell the big lie long enough, we borrowed that from Hitler. People will eventually believe it. You just keep repeating it. And after a while, to the exclusion of everything else, people believe that because they're not hearing anything else. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. What's your definition of unbalanced?
I think somebody who would say that Heidi Cruz had a sex change operation and that we're being lied to, that she and Ted adopted the children and that the media is somehow covering that up.
I would agree with that, but aren't we all unbalanced a little bit, Bill?
Well, it depends on which side of the street you're standing on and which leg you're leaning on. Thank you much for the call, though. 736-0300. 736-0300. Or you can email me at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. The guy gets one phone call a week, and he's got to call my program. bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. Do want to tell you, coming up in a couple of days on the program, they are never unbalanced at Tripp Family Medicine, although if you have balance issues, you should probably make an appointment and see them, and they will help you, point you in the right direction. We'll have a guest from Tripp Family Medicine joining us Wednesday morning. We do this every Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. It's called Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Tripp Family Medicine located on Fillmore Street right here in Twin Falls. And this is an office that is still looking for new patients. And as a patient, if you often need to see the doctor in a hurry, all you need to do is give them a call, and generally they can get you in on the same day or within 24 hours. I had a doctor I used to call his office, and they'd say, we'll see you in 3 weeks. Sometimes you need to get there a little sooner. We have a caller with us, about a minute left in this segment of the program. You're up next. You're on air. Well, all right. One more caller, about 50 seconds. Go ahead.
Yes, the thing that's got me so concerned is this next November on Tuesday, if we don't win, man, we have really blown it. And you see this thing where they're tearing each other up, Cruz and Trump. It is so, to me, it just is so. It's. I don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to indict Hillary? Are we going to end up with Biden? I mean, the anxiety. It's high anxiety. Mel Brooks. I don't know, man. We got to win. That's all that matters. I hope we don't blow this and end up somewhere we don't want to be. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thank you. Well, Kasich said that he's ready in the wings. That he's the real choice of the American people, and when the other two finish eating each other alive, he says he'll be there to save us all from ourselves. God help us. 940, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. It's 35.